So I just wish to inform members and those in the public gallery
Big turnout this
when they arrive. So, just want to inform members and those in the public gallery that all electronic devices, with the exception of the committee tablet devices, must be switched off completely whilst the committee is in session, as they interfere with transmission recording of proceedings. Members are asked to ensure that the tablets are switched to mute mode to ensure quality of sound recording. And can I seek agreement from members on item number 4 that it be recorded by Hansard? Members agreed? Agreed. Thank you. If members are content, we'll proceed through the agenda, starting with item number 1, apologies. Any apologies?
Judith Cochrane, Chair.
Judith Cochrane. No other apologies. Okay, we're going to item number 2, draft minutes of proceedings from the 30th of April 2014 at pages 5 to 9 of members' packs. Members content the draft minutes are an accurate record of proceedings. Agreed, thank you, and that they be published on the committee website. Agreement for that as well, I take it? Yep. Number 3, matters arising the table of requests for information to the DFP. Can I refer members to the summary of the table of requests for information to the DFP, which provides an update on any matters arising not covered elsewhere in the agenda. They are at pages 11, 12 of packs and are merely for noting. Okay, we'll move on, members, to item number 4, private members' bill. A bill to make amateur sports clubs exempt from rates. And this session has been allocated 45 minutes and should be concluded by 10:55 or shortly before. Can I remind members that this session is being recorded by Hansard, and therefore once again all electronic devices must be switched off. Advice was sought from the Bill's office regarding the handle of this proposed private member's bill, and the advice is that a member sponsoring a private member's bill may address their committee to discuss their bill and to take part in a vote on it, but must clearly declare their interest at such meetings, and an appropriate record of this should be made and retained. It was also advised that this would be consistent with the broad principle that members cannot readily be disenfranchised, but it would be subject to the rules against advocacy. Can I refer members to the following document, Private Members' Bill presentation slides, there at pages 14 to 26 of your packs. And can I welcome Mr. Dahi McKay, who will be known to some of you, if not all of you, MLA, Miss Katie Dixon, Executive Manager of the Northern Ireland Sports Forum, Mr. Ken Armstrong, Manager of Belfast Indoor Bowling Club, and Patrice Hardy, Party Support from Sinn Féin. So can I invite you to make an opening statement, Dahi?
Thank you, Chair. Okay. Can I start proceeding?
Roles are reversed somewhat today.
The hunter becomes the hunted, somebody says. Can I say it's a great pleasure to come before this fine committee of the Assembly and to make a presentation in regard to those private members' bill. Go easy. Chair, this is an issue that has been floating around for a while. There was an Assembly debate on the issue of an exemption for amateur sports clubs in terms of rates back in 2011, some 3 years ago. So it is an issue that's been discussed on a cross-party basis, to be fair, for some time now. So what I wanted to do was to examine it in greater detail to see what merit there would be in introducing an exemption of sorts for amateur sports clubs, and have been out to consultation since November of last year. Now, the consultation was to conclude in February. and because of the great interest in it, we decided to extend that until mid-March. So the consultation period, by way of my own consultation, has now concluded. And it has been supported by many different sports organisations from the north. The major sports organisations that are always referred to are Ulster Rugby, the AFA and the GAA. They are all supportive of this, as are the Sports Forum and many other organisations that I wouldn't have been familiar with initially as well. So what I've done, I went out to a number of towns in Fermanagh, Tyrone, Antrim, across the north to make presentations to different sports clubs, and I've included some of those slides for committee members' information there today. So why is there a need for this exemption for sports clubs? I think, and in an age now when we're increasingly talking about the health benefits and the benefits of public health, I think we need to increasingly look at sport in terms of health and in terms of making a contribution to a health service and a more rounder view of a health service. There are approximately 37,000 volunteers in community sports in the north, and that's to an estimated value of £9 million. There's benefits in terms of public health, physical health as well as mental health, and plays a crucial role in terms of preventative measures in terms of obesity and diabetes, and also relieves pressure on the health service. So something that came out of the consultation was that this represents a huge saving, perhaps uncosted in a large in terms of government, in particular local government, who would, it is argued, be providing services for the community in the absence of those amateur and sports clubs. In terms of the current position, we do have 80% rates relief here in the north. In the south, any land developed for sport is fully exempt, and in England, Scotland and Wales it's a halfway house in that they have the 80% and councils have the discretion to extend that to 100%. In terms of the pressures in clubs, pressures are growing. Emigration is a big issue for a lot of teams across the different sporting codes. Sponsorship as well. I come across, I know of one rugby club in my own locality who relied heavily on a construction firm for sponsorship. That firm is no longer there, and that has left a big gap in their overheads. And of course construction, which has taken such a hit in recent times, will mean that a lot of clubs are in similar boat. And of course an increase in overhead costs in recent years as well in terms of electricity and other utilities has also put additional pressures on clubs. In terms of the process, it was twofold. We had an online questionnaire for members of the public and groups and clubs to fill in. There was also an option to respond by way of written correspondence as well. So we received around 1,033 replies, which is considerable in terms of a private member's bill. Our first question was whether they supported the proposal to exempt amateur sports clubs from paying rates. And in terms of the response, 1,022 said yes, 5 no's and 6 unsure, so overwhelmingly there was support for the proposal. The second question was whether we should use the community and amateur sports clubs status as a way of qualifying for this particular exemption. Again, overwhelming support for that particular measure. 971 said yes, 16 no, 23 were unsure. And then we also asked what do amateur sports clubs contribute to in terms of the community, and we had a number of options, and overwhelmingly there was recognition that amateur sports clubs improve public health, lead to better community relations, lead to better individual discipline, less antisocial behaviour, greater appreciation of local community and increased activities for young people. So all in all, it was a very much a positive response in terms of all that. In terms of the respondents then, there was a wide variety of sports responded. Clay pitching clubs, cycling, boxing, gymnastics, taekwondo, gliding, badminton, yacht clubs, sailing clubs, tennis, squash, kickboxing, athletics. So it was above and beyond the 4 or 5 general main sports that we usually refer to. And I've also included there some of the comments that came from those who responded to the consultation. One was from the rugby club, who said in this professional area this particular measure will significantly aid clubs to lower debts and to level the balance sheets. And something that came up in the public meetings we held as well was the fact that a lot of clubs want to expand their services. They want to build new stands, they want to build new club rooms. But obviously they're factoring in the additional rate costs that would have year on year, so it's actually preventing them. Whereas they would gladly meet the upfront capital costs in terms of that expansion, they are wary about having the additional rates cost year on year, and believe that is putting those particular projects beyond their reach. Another correspondent refers to the epidemic of obesity, especially among our youth, and its promotion of amateur sports that will prove the most cost-effective method of preventing soaring health costs that will cripple our economy, and the small loss of revenue from rates exempting amateur clubs is more than compensated by it being a significant investment in proactive healthcare, which I thought was a very interesting term to use. Another respondent said that this would take the burden off local councils to provide for local communities, and so they agreed with the bill. So that's just a brief overview of where we are at the moment, Chair. I'll pass over to Katie now just to give a brief introduction to her role and her views.
Before we go any further, can I ask you, Dahi, just to formally declare an interest as the bill sponsor and chair of the committee, just to keep everyone right?
Can I thank you, Chair? I thought I did declare that interest, but I stand corrected, and I will declare that interest.
Thank you very much. Katie?
My role is Executive Manager of the Northern Sports Forum. We're the representative body for all governing bodies of sport. So whilst our primary aim is to work with and support governing bodies, obviously a lot of their work can't be done without their clubs on the ground delivering at grassroots. So the Northern Sports Forum has been for many years campaigning on this issue of rates relief for sports clubs in Northern Ireland, and it's really a parity issue of bringing us into line with sports clubs in the Republic of Ireland and sports clubs in England, Wales and Scotland, who all are able to avail in some way, shape or form, depending on the legislation, of 100% rates relief. So essentially that's just a brief introduction. I'm really here more to answer questions and any kind of details that may come up.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to speak from the witnesses? Okay, we'll move on to questions then. Thanks very much for the presentation, Dahi. You said there that the relief is the same in England and Wales as it is here, 80%, but in England, Wales and Scotland, they have discretion to waive presumably the other 20%. Have you any indication to what extent that is being used?
I know in Scotland it's used very widely because it's something that they've pushed through their councils and the legislation. Now just in England and Wales, to avail of the 80% rates relief, you must be registered as a community amateur sports club, and there's around 40% sports clubs in England and Wales who are registered as that, so that's their level of rates relief, and they're able to avail of the extra discretion. In terms of actually the councils willing to provide the discretion, because it's matched by the Treasury, there's no objection from the councils to do so.
Okay.
It's widely used.
When you say it's matched by the Treasury, can you give us more detail on that?
No, not really. All I know is that it's clawed back, kind of year financial end, so it's the councils themselves are not out of pocket.
Because of it, right. And would that be the same if we had a situation here where you had discretion? Would that be the same, do you think, or would that have to be negotiated?
Well, the councils we've spoken to, largely, now I've not spoken to every single one, are largely in favour of, and they would be happy to implement this discretion, but that's not really what we were proposing today. Anyway, we want kind of a mandatory 100% rates relief for sports clubs providing amateur sport.
Okay. Obviously, Dahi has outlined very clearly there are the many benefits which would attach to 100% relief, but a lot of people will say, yeah, that's fine, but what are the costs going to be? Have you done any work on that side of it?
We've tried to get some figures from the Department of Finance and Personnel, Chair, and there's few figures coming back. One figure we did get was from 2010 and 11, and that was for rates paid by clubs with relief, and that was 1.4 million. And that would have included non-community and amateur sports clubs, so amateur sports clubs in general. So I've been on to the department a number of times about that, and that is the extent of their knowledge in terms of that. So I don't know if there's a difficulty in identifying sports clubs and getting that precise figure. But if that is the case, that 1.4 million, somewhere between 1 and 2 million, is what you're talking about in terms of a cost. I don't think that's a big cost. In terms of the bill, I was actually surprised at how low it was. But I suppose with the present status quo, where you have 80% relief, then perhaps it isn't going to be a great cost. But consulting with many small clubs, I know some small rural clubs, they're paying rates of maybe £800, £900 a year. Some with bigger facilities are obviously paying more, but they see that as a huge overhead in terms of their small local community. And so it would have a much bigger impact to exempt clubs across the board rather than what is done in England, Scotland and Wales, where it is left up to councils. I believe that the cost we can meet from the centre would be easier to implement.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. It's not a huge cost, and obviously you mentioned there the epidemic in obesity and the drive to reduce that. And there are costs, obviously, with dealing with obesity and so on. Is there any way of estimating in figures the benefits that the bill would bring?
Well, that's something the committee might want to undertake, Chair. But certainly, I mean, there will be a lot of documentation out there already from public health organisations. I'm sure the Committee for Health has looked at this as well in terms of how great a saving this is going to make to the centre. But it's no secret that all political parties recognise that in terms of obesity, in terms of diabetes, in terms of those rates, they're going to have a huge impact in terms of cost to the public purse over the next 10 or 20 years. So I believe that this pays for itself in the longer term, and especially when you take into consideration that a lot of clubs are holding back on that capital expansion to build further facilities within both urban and rural communities. If we can do away with the rates in those facilities, you would see a greater expansion of sports facilities throughout the community.
Okay. Are there any legal or practical considerations associated with the bill that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. We have considered that, and we believe it's best to try and keep the bill as simple as possible. We want to amend the Rates NI Order 1977 by simply adding this reference group to a list of qualifying groups for rates. Now, at this stage, we're at fairly early stages of the bill. We're open-minded. We want to hear views from your committee in terms of this particular bill going forward, and we're open-minded in terms of any different approaches we should take in terms of exempting amateur sports clubs from rates.
Okay. And can you give us a rough timetable for the bill from here on?
Well, I'm going to be meeting with the Finance Minister next Monday, and after that I will be meeting with the Bill's Office, and after we receive final comments from yourself and the Minister, we plan then to go to the drafters to draft an initial bill. When that comes to the House will probably be after the summer, I would imagine, so we would hope to have this completed and through the Assembly by early 2015, I would hope.
Okay. Thanks very much. Peter.
Thank you, and thank you, Daphne, for your information. The Chair covered a couple of the points, but I suppose in terms of the different options that lie in front of us in terms of what way this, obviously, can be taken forward, I understand the attraction of saying from a simplicity point of view of simply 100% relief in all cases for amateur clubs. There certainly would be certain administrative quality to that as well, but I note sort of, while there's an argument that it has been more generous in both the south and across the water basis, that neither of them have gone for a complete 100% on everything. Now, mention was made, if we take, I suppose, each of them in turn, England, Scotland, Wales, we're talking about 80% relief plus a discretion, and mention was made about how frequently, if you like, that discretion is used. Is there a particular sort of criteria in which a club can effectively qualify for the discretion, or is it simply, if you like, at the goodwill of a particular council or that bit? Because, I mean, I think discretion is probably is more attractive if there's some sort of clear rationale which says, well, actually, that club, really the 80%, they're lucky maybe to be getting the 80%, that club deserves the 100% or whatever. I mean, what's the position in terms of how the discretion is actually employed?
Well, from as far as the fact that a club must be registered as a community amateur sports club, be able to avail of the 20% discretion. So in that way, you know, there's a few processes that go through that has to be very clear about the British amateur sport. You can't have professionals, things like that. And your constitution has to be set up in a certain way that it's kind of for charitable purposes as well. So in terms of criteria, that's where it stands.
And by use, whenever you mention, for example, by use of professionals, because I mean, again, one of the issues, which to some extent is, and you've obviously got a wide range of responses from a range of sporting clubs in that regard. Attitude towards professionalism can be different depending from sport to sport. You know, you went in a situation that, you know, for example, if you take, I suppose at one level, the very highest level, if you take sort of rugby 30 or 40 years ago, you got a sort of sham amateurism of the situation in which everybody officially was an amateur, but if you were playing for your national side, you know, there were ways that people were getting paid. Also, I'm aware, for example, if you take, let's say, the sport of cricket at NCU level, they are essentially, the players are amateur, but it's quite often as part of the rules you will have at a certain level where a club is able to hire each year one professional. Now, for example, would that be something that would, in those circumstances, where a club would qualify or not qualify, where they're in a position, for instance, to have annually sort of a professional? And I don't know whether that's confined simply to that sport.
Well, the HMRC recently reviewed their rules on community amateur sports club, because this obviously is an issue. There is a limit. Now, I don't know it verbatim off the top of my head, but there is a limit. So a professional can be paid up to a certain amount, but the professional almost must also be involved in the club. So what a lot of cricket clubs would do, for example, they will coach their junior teams and things like that. So that's how you can get around. So it's not a blanket ban and you can't pay any of your athletes, but there are limits and there are guidance from the HMRC in line with that.
And also in the comparison with down south, and again, obviously I appreciate you have a lot more research than we're just faced with what we've got here. In terms of the exemption where it's land developed for sport is fully exempt, how is that interpreted? Because, for example, if it was a question of, right, here's a club, we want, be it for training purposes or because we're looking to put a second 11, third 11, whatever it happens to be in terms of that particular sport, it's maybe we're looking to get an extra pitch or something of that nature, and that clearly would qualify as under those circumstances I could see as land being developed for sport. If, for example, you had a situation in which you had a clubhouse, and say you have within the clubhouse essentially arguably largely used for social purposes to try and fund that, does that count as land for sport purposes, where say you're expanding the clubhouse and say, well, we're making an extension to the bar, for instance, and that, I mean, does that count as for the purposes in the Republic? How's that interpreted? Do you know at all? Or?
I'm not sure entirely. This is one of the issues that was raised in the consultation in terms of Republic meetings. Was there a number of amateur sports clubs, cricket, GAA, soccer, rugby, that have bar facilities? A number of clubs wanted bars to be exempt as well, because the profits from the bars go right back into amateur sports clubs. Now, we are in the process of carrying out some research to see if that is the case in England and Wales. I heard reference that it was, so we're waiting to get that. But that is something I would like a view from the committee on as well.
Specifically as well, I'm just again judging from what you've said in terms of the position of the public. It's land for sport. It's fully exempt. Now, whether or not land that is then connected with an amateur sports club, but is, you know, do you count, as I said, for example, okay, let's take some of it's less contentious, but if you have for example, a pavilion where we want to put in additional changing facilities, put in, to accommodate extra teams or whatever. Does that kind of land develop for sport being fully, or is it simply the playing surfaces? Or, I mean, again, it'd be useful if we could see how that is interpreted, because
As far as we're at the minute, it's only the land that is used for actually playing the sport is exempt currently.
I mean, it's anything, and I appreciate from a simplicity point of view, simply going to 100% may has certain advantages in terms of, from an administrative point of view, etc. Probably one way or the other, money's not a big issue on that side of things. I'm just curious to some extent how in other jurisdictions, whereas they appear to have gone a bit further than what's here, all of them have taken what we describe as a nuanced position rather than simply going for the blanket position. Just want to mention, I suppose, finally, in terms of that, on the basis of, I mentioned about because it's very understandable, for any amateur sporting club saying, do you want to move to a position which you're paying zero rates? It would be a fair degree of no-brainer for any sporting club to say, yes, we want that, and that sort of thing. There is also another side of the coin. Again, this perhaps comes down in basis mentioned about, for example, the bar facilities on it. And take any action, it will have ripple effects elsewhere. What level of consultation you have with business organisations, and particularly, I suppose, with the licensed, with the licensed trade in terms of that? Because I could see a situation where, if they feel effectively, here's some money being given over, which in many cases may simply be used to expand club facilities, provide a bar, effectively almost maybe being, because they don't have to pay X thousand in terms of rates, actually maybe it'll deploy it into providing cheaper membership fees, cheaper, that actually they see a potential downside. But I just wondered what level of contact or discussions you've had with the licensed trade in relation to this.
Well, in terms of the initial consultation, we didn't foresee any issue in terms of the businesses to which you refer, but it did become one of the major issues in terms of the consultation. And the Minister has actually raised it to say, there may be an effect and something we need to look at. So we recognise it's something that you do need to consult with other groups about as well.
So from that point of view, you haven't at this stage met with say pubs of Ulster or some of the licensed victuallers or something of that nature, but that would be something that would be on your agenda given the fact the issues have been raised. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Mitchell?
Thank you, Chair. Hello. It's a very good presentation. Just in relation to the respondents, and it seemed to me to be a very comprehensive group, we can presume from their inclusion that the responses were generally positive, even if there are a range of, or a spectrum of expectations and comments. Is that true in the first instance, that this represents support? Yeah. Were there any objectors within, say, the amateur sporting fraternity?
There was a couple of objectors. I think there was 5 objected to and 1,022 supported. So there's minimal, really. Yeah. None from any significant organisations from within the sporting sector.
And did you speak to the sports council? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what is their view? You may have mentioned this, and I missed it. But what's their view?
The sports council don't really take a view on it. They don't really see it as necessarily their role to work that directly with sports clubs. They fund governing bodies of sport, not their clubs, and very much the club sector has always kind of been left to its own devices. Largely now, when our organisation kind of started working on this a few years ago, we did work closely with the Sports Council, and they were largely supportive. And I know that a paper a few years ago did go to their board, which was accepted in principle. But it was just tough to keep the momentum going behind it when they're kind of pulled in all sorts of directions. But I don't see how any kind of organisation whose job it is to lead and develop sport in Northern Ireland could object to it in principle, because it would essentially be investing more back into grassroots, which is incredibly important for the sector to support then the governing body sector as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly they are a stakeholder in this, and as the bill progresses, they will have to take a position, given that quite a lot of their funding applications, at least in part, deal with the costs and overheads involved for these organisations that they are doing, I think, very good work in supporting. And then my last kind of point is that, and I mean, obviously I'm supporting this this approach, is the whole question of the ownership of premises. Peter kind of was coming on to it. Is that a qualifying condition? If, for example, say an amateur sporting organisation is actually in leased or rented premises, how do we deal with that particular technicality?
It's not something that's actually been raised. I mean, the clubs that mainly responded owned their own premises, or they used public premises, premises that are owned by the council, so they wanted the option to go outside that. So it's a grey area perhaps we haven't looked at, but certainly something that we would.
Okay, well, I'm just drawing attention to it, and I actually know of immediately, just in an area in my constituency, where there is a boxing club, which is in rented conditions, very poor conditions as well. They're not in a great position to develop the premises, either financially or legally, but they're paying rates and all the rest. So there is an area there that I suggest that you look at, because it will come up, and the best of luck. That's what I say. I think it's a good project. Well done.
Yeah, I think that the point that Mitchell mentioned there is a possible issue. I've come across one example in my constituency where there were difficulties around that, so it might be useful to ensure that any difficulties that might arise in that respect are ironed out early on. I was just going to ask you, out of interest, the 5 respondents who weren't in agreement with the proposal, did they give? It seems quite strange. Did they give any reasons for their non-agreement?
I think they were just spoilers, to be honest.
All right. Okay.
I think they were just individuals as opposed to
all right. Okay.
As types of clubs. Like, so all the clubs and organisations.
There weren't clubs. There were individuals rather than clubs.
Like that.
Okay. Thanks very much. Sorry, Leslie.
Thanks, Chair. My question is again on shared premises where you have professional and amateur in the same sort of complex. How would you see that been dealt with? Would you see that been as a separate revaluation?
I mean, by and large, that's not very common within the sports sector here. I mean, I can't think of. Well, I don't know if you're thinking of a specific example, maybe.
Well, there are examples where professional clubs and amateurs, they encourage amateurs on the same campus.
In terms of, say, maybe a rugby club like Harlequins or something like that. Yeah, or in some. Yeah, I mean, I think that have to be looked at, because I think if we applied the community amateur sports club criteria, that would kind of remove a lot of those issues, because there will be very kind of stringent rules on what is professional, what is amateur, and that would kind of maybe take away some of that grey area. So there would be some of the larger professional clubs wouldn't be able to avail of it, because of that, and because they're profit making as well. I mean, one of the key parts of a cask is that it shouldn't be profit making, and all profits should be reinvested back into the sports club. So that would have to be kind of considered depending on how the bill went forward.
So you haven't got a plan ready to deal with that?
No, it's not. No, not ourselves personally. No, we're not responsible for drafting the bill. I mean, we're really kind of want to see an effective financial burden taken away from the sports club sector, whilst being mindful that you won't be able to please everyone, and there won't be a one-size-fits-all kind of absolute approach to this. There is going to have to be some discretions as well.
Yeah, I think though it's very important that that there is clear division right from the outset in this, and that there's no sort of scope for perhaps aiding and abetting other things other than what the bill really sets out to do. The other point's been touched on that I would consider a problem, and that is the one of the social clubs. I mean, it is unfair competition to other vintners. I know that they moan about them already, for example. The whole bar trade, of course, is not going through a very good period, but to have a situation where a social club wasn't paying rates, needs to be addressed.
Yeah. I think, on that point, Leslie, we want to find out what the situation is in the South and England, Scotland and Wales, because the argument coming from the clubs, and the argument coming from the clubs quite forcefully, and I played devil's advocate a number of presentations in terms of this, was that, well, our purpose is to serve the community. The profits coming from these bars, etc., are going right back into the club, so it's not the same as a business. So that's something that will be one of the main issues with this bill, I would predict, as it goes through the Assembly and for the committee itself to consider. But certainly we would want to establish what the situation is elsewhere, to see what the experience is there and the impact that it has or has not had on businesses.
One of the dangers I see is that social clubs do have a big social membership. Quite a few of those are perhaps not really involved directly, or maybe even have a lot of interest in sport, but it's a cheap place for pleasant evening and subsidised beverages. So that does need to be looked at, bearing in mind you're competing really with that sort of market. What's the other vintners' premises?
I think the committee should be aware that in terms of profits from social clubs are really the only income that many sports clubs actually have to rely on. They don't get income from councils, they don't get kind of publicly funding. Very few do, or if it is, it's very small grants for very specific things. So in terms of actually keeping the club sector going, those clubs that have social areas and bars, that is absolutely essential to that club sector. I mean, you can yourself at Belfast Indoor Bowls Club, which is a massive facility, and the bar is absolutely essential to the running of your club. And without that, you're talking about much higher subscription fees for the members who are actually there to actually play sport and things like that. So it is a difficult one, and there's certain that we can certainly foresee objections to it, absolutely, and would be open to maybe having just the playing fields, just the playing areas exempted.
Ken, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity, gentlemen. I, as has been said, I'm secretary of the Belfast Indoor Bowls Club with 1,100 members, give or take. This time of year for clubs to do their audit, we've just done it. We've made a loss of £13,000 last year. We can deal with that, that's not a problem. But if we look at the rates that we've budgeted for next year, it's 13,000. So if we didn't have the rates, we would be actually breaking even. This is apart from the increase in lighting and utilities that's already been mentioned by Mr Mackay. We are a cross-community club. We go from 8 to 80, and we deal with everybody. But at the same time, we're trying to expand in terms of utilities and saving money with PV panels and so on. We can't do that. We can't invest in that until we actually see our way clear. And if we had the rates removed, certainly, I mean, £13,000 would be a massive help for us. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, can I ask you a question about golf clubs? Some of them are privately owned and privately run. Some of them are privately owned and run by the voluntary membership. How would they fit in under the scheme?
Well, that is one of the reasons why we're using the CAS definition. So any club that will qualify for the 100% rate relief will have to meet the conditions to become a community amateur sports club. So broadly speaking, they have to be open to the whole community, be organised on an amateur basis, and have as its main purpose providing facilities for and promoting participation in one or more eligible sports. So any clubs that can reach that particular threshold will qualify, and I would imagine there'll be a lot of clubs that wouldn't.
Regardless of whether the ownership is in private hands or not. Okay, thank you. Adrian?
Thanks, Chair. You just asked a question I was going to ask about golf clubs there and all, but Dathly, just another reason that come to mind there was that those that did reply to your consultation, did they say that they were actually paying rates now at this moment in time, and if they weren't paying rates like Ken has said here, I would encourage them to have their own premises or move out and like council rented premises or whatever. And then they come back and feedback on that.
The problem and the reason why we want the 100% exemption, and the reason we're saying that this should be absolutely clear, is there seems to be a lot of disparity within the rate system in terms of sports clubs as it is. So we were going to some clubs and some were paying rates on a stand but not paying for their changing rooms, and almost vice versa in another case as well. So there's a lot of disparity. There's also riding clubs, some were paying rates, some weren't. So there was a lot of cases where it showed to us that it wasn't being applied equally across the board. But there were a number of clubs who did indicate that they would like to have their own premises, would be more minded to do so if they didn't have to pay rates, and a number of small clubs who would be willing to expand and build facilities for young people, extra pitches, if they didn't have to pay rates on them, but they can't at this moment in time because of the credit crunch, because of the financial pressures that are on their club. If we could relieve that rates burden, then they will build those premises quicker.
That's fine, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you very much indeed, and apologise for coming in late. Just in relation to social clubs and the necessity to have sometimes a social club attached to a sports club. I appreciate that it has to be recognised by the Sports Council as a proper club, what mechanism do you believe that there would be put in place to ensure that people do not set up a sports club under that name with no other intention? Yes, they might well have 2 or 3 token members who are supposedly involved in sport, whether that be tiddlywinks or whatever, but I know it's not recognised as I've been told, but something else. And their only way of dealing with it is to actually impact upon the licensed traders who are vintners from the Vintners Association. Really, it's just a club, sell alcohol and do with that. How do you actually ensure that you're actually dealing with clubs which are genuine? Because I know, and having dealt with many clubs, there is a desire for them to actually go down this route. And I'm saying, what is there to ensure that you don't have those who want to abuse the system?
As far as I understand it, I think there is actually a provision at the minute when applying rates relief that a certain proportion of the club must be solely for the purposes of pursuing amateur sport. This is I think it's around 30. Is it 30?
Yes, it's part of the CASC criteria.
Right. So there is provision. So whilst so I would say applying similar criteria to that say at least 40% of the club's members must be paying members or something of that ilk. Unfortunately, I don't actually have the figures in front of me today as people tell you. But again, because there is tax relief related to sports clubs at the minute, there's a lot of actually legislation and rules and regulations around this anyway to ensure that it's not entirely abused. As you say, it could be open to if we were perhaps just gave this blanket discretion. You're absolutely right that could be the case. But if we follow kind of HMRC rules and current rating rules, then certainly that shouldn't be the case, and it shouldn't be open to.
Do you not think that this should come about along with a review of what is registered clubs legislation? Because it's something which I've dealt with in my own constituency. We've one football club, and the social club and the football club have had a fallout between them, and as a consequence they have split, and they are 2 different identities, and they stand alone totally, and are not contributing back into the club at all, the football club and that. I mean, so I'm saying, how do you ensure that? And the loophole is there within the Clubs Act and the registration of clubs for them to do that. So we do need to actually check that both are marrying together, because it's the overall cost. Appreciate that it's an 80% reduction that they can receive now, but the further 20%, has there been any indicative calculations come back from DFP, or have you requested anything from DFP in relation to what that would measure up to in a reduction of revenue back into LPS?
In terms of the overall cost,
Yeah.
1.4 million was the latest estimate we got for 2011-2012. I think it was 2011-2012. So I said earlier that it's pretty much 2010-2011. Sorry. So that would include non-community and amateur sport clubs as exists at the moment as well. So it's a minimal cost in terms of the overall tax take.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask you, In the light of some of the points that were raised today, for example, the question around premises and lands which are leased, do you intend, and other points that were raised in relation to social clubs, do you intend to do any further research?
Yeah, I mean, we've already commissioned some research in terms of the use of social clubs in England, Scotland and Wales. So there are certainly, I mean, we've already intended or announced our intentions to consult in terms of the business community, in terms of pubs of Ulster and the Vendors Association. So there is a possible wider impact that we need to take into account. But we'll be meeting with the Minister next week as well, so we'll be under no illusion as to what his position is in regard to the bill and any concerns he might have, and indeed DFP and LPS would have in regard to this too. But certainly we would like a view from the committee as well in terms of how we craft the bill. We may decide to keep it very general in terms of first stage, and then it may be open for the committee to make some amendments to that as the process takes place.
Okay, whatever. You're happy to keep the committee informed about any additional information that you receive that you think might be relevant?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Sorry, no apologies. No, just there's one point I just want to make the committee aware of, just with regards, obviously, since the introduction of this private members bill, the charities legislation has now been enacted,
yes.
And obviously this adds a whole another dimension to this discussion, in light of the fact that sports clubs will be compelled to either register as a charity or register as a community under sports club. So essentially, as you know, the charities are able to avail of 100% rate relief as a registered charity, and what we're concerned with is once you're registered as a cask, you can't phone up HMRC and deregister unless your constitution or the purposes of your club changes significantly. So there is a concern that we could be actually going into a very inequitable state in terms of the club sector for those clubs who are already casks and don't have the option to register as a charity. So that's just something to be mindful of, and this obviously legislation would ensure that that wasn't happening and that all sports clubs were given equal footing in terms of their rates bills. I think it's important to remember in that context.
Okay. That's grand. No further questions. Thank you very much, Dahi and your team.
Thank you, Chair.
And no doubt we'll meet at committee stage. Thank you very much. Can I just ask members, are there any issues that I feel that the committee should follow up on, and if so, what form should that take? Paul?
I think we should ask the DFP to come and present the committee as an evidence session on this matter. Stands, is that scheduled? A date for that?
That will be happening during the committee stage, presumably. Do you want to preempt that with an additional?
Chair, just
before then?
a note, and it may be useful. I mean, Duffy indicated that I think he's due to meet the minister on next week on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just wondering whether it's DFP evidence session or whatever. I mean, I think it may be useful to get some level of steer as to where then the further issues or obstacles in relation to that once that
From
is taken
Dahi
place.
himself?
Well, potentially for now, I think we should maybe put a little bit of probe out to DFP in that regard, because if they're saying, well, actually, yes, we like X, Y, and Z, but we think A, B, and C is a problem,
Right.
E, E, and F will have to be overcome, and such you may need to do. I think it's useful to get some level of steer on that side of it.
So you're supporting Paul's proposal, yeah? Mitchell?
I mean, I presume in terms of Paul's suggestion, what we're actually doing is getting a steer from the department as opposed to the evidence at this stage.
I think that's exactly.
Yeah, and I think we should try and get the same from DCAL as well, because it would help, I suppose, both the process of drafting up the bill as well. It just informs the process if we know if there is already either work that has been done or there are alternative perspectives on this.
Because I think, Chair, from my point of view, if you can, and many of us want to try and help clubs as much as we can in our areas, and I think it's vitally important that if there is an issue that we can either address at as an early a stage as possible, you can actually maybe smooth something like this through the process by identifying.
No, that's exactly what I thought, and I support that. That is the right approach. If you just talk about this for a moment, DSD would probably have a view on this that would be helpful, and maybe NILGA, because there are quite a lot of councils who are already in the in between here,
And decal.
I think you mentioned.
I did mention them. Yeah.
Chair, I mean, we don't overburden just at this stage because all those will come to the evidence session. The other thing just occurred to me is, could we maybe get a short research paper just on, mention's been made of how the exemptions, if you like, are applied in other jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Could maybe tease out, because the one thing that slightly strikes me is, on the one hand, it seems all the other jurisdictions have gone a bit further than we have.
Yeah.
But all have maybe shied away from an absolute guaranteed 100% entitlement in all circumstances. Now, I'm just wondering if various jurisdictions have, since he said yes, there's a problem we want to sort out type of thing, but have all adopted some level of nuance within the approach. It might be useful just to check out what way, for example, we need to teach out a little bit, mention to the Republic of, they seem to have a full exemption on certain bits, maybe it doesn't apply fully across the board. It seems quite an odd situation of this discretion payment and that side of things. I think if we just tease out a wee bit more just background on where those bits as to how people qualify, what precisely they qualify for, because that might have to be a wee bit of nuancing within any legislation as well, type of thing.
Okay. Leslie, do you want to come in there?
I was just wondering that last point, Chair, about the number that actually registered as charities. That's an interesting point. I'm just wondering if we could maybe quantify that in some way.
Right. Okay, so are members happy that we commission a research paper to look into the nuances, as Peter called them, around the discretion issue and other issues? Happy enough for that?
But just on the point that I was discussing, Chair, I think we should scope in some ways, because of the way our departments are structured and relate to one another. Just off the top of your head, you can name 3 or 4 departments that all have input, including education, that occurs to me, because quite significantly they produce or they provide playing facilities and indeed premises that are used by amateur sporting organisations as well. So perhaps some kind of scoping out.
Well,
there could be a way of actually, in a more cost-effective way, of achieving the same outcome without necessarily throwing more money at the problem and letting continuing kind of hidden supports and subsidies continue.
Well, are you happy that we request written papers from certain departments? Okay. DFP, DSD was mentioned, DECAL, NILGA, Department of Education and Health, since the obesity issue arose. Okay?
Yeah.
Are members content we do that? Okay, we'll take our ease for about 30 seconds while the Chair takes up his position here.
Okay, members, moving on to the next item. Legislative consent motion on changes in APD bands in UK Finance Bill 2014. I can refer members to a copy of the first draft committee report. This is at page 3 of your table papers, together with related correspondence and papers from DFP. I advise members that the LCM was laid in the Business Office on the 10th of April, and the committee must produce a report and a motion within 15 working days. Therefore, a report must be agreed no later than Wednesday, the 14th of March. I can also remind members of the meeting of the 30th of April. The committee received the draft report on the LCM based on the evidence received it was requested rather, and I'll be prepared for initial discussion today. Shane, do you want to speak briefly to this?
Very briefly, Chair. There's a short 2-page draft committee report. It's just for initial consideration today. It's final consideration next week. Just on outlining the committee's deliberations on the issue. Just to remind members, this arises from the decision, the Chancellor's decision to reduce the long-haul bands B, C and D down to one band. So there'll just be band A for the short-haul flights and band B for long-haul flights. Members are aware that the Executive already has devolved powers over the direct long-haul flights. So essentially, the committee tried to tease out the implications of this for the Executive powers whenever the DFP officials were up at the previous meeting. And the two issues the committee raised were whether this move would restrict the Executive powers in any way, and the official explained that whilst technically, in terms of there'll only be one long-haul band, so if the Executive ever decided to have different long-haul rates, it could potentially limit the powers in that respect. But the reason for the Executive sought the devolved powers over direct long-haul flights was in order to reduce the rate down to zero, to save the Belfast and Europe route and encourage other direct long-haul routes and boost the economy, etc. So it's not, that issue isn't really an issue. The other concern the committee raised was in respect of whether it would restrict the Executive powers in terms of private jets, flight by private jets, and the committee was reassured that that wasn't the case, that the Executive has the powers in terms of private jets, in terms of direct long-haul flights. So there were no real issues of concerns, essentially, and the committee was assured there was essentially a legislative, legal, technical basis for requiring this legislative consent motion. The report basically just sets out those issues that were considered and the committee's kind of conclusions on them, and then a recommendation to support the Department in seeking the Assembly's endorsement. So it's really just for members to take away today and then for final consideration next week.
Okay, members, that'll be enough.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next briefing from Department of Finance Personnel. I can refer members to a letter from the Minister outlining the impact of the Budget 2014 on the North at pages 29 through to 32 of your packs. Okay, gentlemen, very welcome back to the committee. Peter, you want to make an opening statement before we go into questions?
No problem, Chair. Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity to highlight the issues during the Chancellor's 2014 budget. On the public spending side, there were only very marginal changes for Northern Ireland. There were some additions of 21 million over the next 2 years. Additions were, in fact, detailed in a note that was sent to the committee on the 19th of March. And they'll be copied into the June monitoring round this year and the 15-16 budget process. There are also a number of tax changes announced by the Chancellor, which were also included in the 19th of March note. So from a strategic budget perspective, perhaps the most interesting aspect was the related Office of Budget Responsibility projections going forward. The OBR actually confirmed that they expect the UK economy to grow quite significantly over the next 5 years. But that's not going to translate into the public expenditure environment, unfortunately. It looks like we will see a highly constrained PE environment going forward, especially on the resource side. So in terms of resource DL budgets, the OBR expects at a UK level reductions in cash terms of 1% in 16-17, 3.5% in 17-18, and 1% in 18-19. So in real terms, they're really quite severe public expenditure reductions. Of course, that's at a UK level. We will not know the outcome for Northern Ireland until the next UK spending review. On the capital side, things are looking a bit more positive, and we do expect increases in the coming years. One important caveat, though, is that any increases may be in the form of financial transactions capital. We don't know that until the next spending review, but it could be more of that as opposed to commercial capital, and you know the restrictions that apply to that particular type of capital. So to conclude, the public spending position is highly constrained until the end of the decade. On a positive note, though, the OBR is forecasting the UK government to run a small surplus in 18-19, but it still has to address that huge amount of debt that's been built up over the years since the crisis in 2007. UK government debt is still forecast to be 74% of UK GDP by 1819. It was about less than 40% before the crisis, so still a big issue to address in the coming years. Okay, so thank you, Chair, and lots of questions.
Thank you. In terms of the Minister's letter, Peter, there's reference to the funding envelope available in 15-16 financial year and how that will be factored into the Executive's 2015-16 budget process.
Yes.
Could you tell us at all what the proposed timetable is for that process, and when will that be considered by the Executive?
Yes. We still work on the basis of a final budget by December. But the latest you'd want a final budget agreed. So working backwards from that, we want a draft budget published before consultation sometime in September, ideally. So obviously, working back from that, we're getting closer and closer. Obviously, there are a number of issues such as welfare reform which will impact on the position, and there's no clarity on where it's going at the moment. So at the moment, it's a bit in limbo until we get clarity on that. I would have thought. Ministers have already said in June monitoring there's going to be cuts unless there's an agreement on welfare reform. So I think that's sort of the first crunch point probably in that respect. So we're simply waiting to see what happens over the next month.
Also, OBR predicts that the economy for the North and across the board will grow by 2.7% next year and continue to grow until 2018. Has DFP done any local estimates in terms of growth for the economy?
For Northern Ireland? We don't. I know, Tony, you might be something about it. I know Neil Gibson's.
Yeah, the University of Ulster and their Northern Ireland Centre for Economic Policy produces their own forecasts. I don't have those to hand, but they are slightly. They do, as we have done historically, they do lag the growth in the UK overall.
Yeah.
Is that the only source you would use to measure growth? Obviously, there are a number of different economic sources would.
Well, there's a number of others, like a number of the other consultancy houses would produce forecasts. Yes, so we look at the broad range of forecasts that are available. Yeah.
Also, a number of other indicators like the PMI index, published by the Ulster Bank and other various. And I think the Danske Bank does a consumer survey. Mm-hmm. So there are other indicators there. You look at what happens in the local economy.
In terms then of the enterprise zone for Coleraine, does DFP have much of a role in terms of that, and what is the process in terms of putting that in place?
We'll hand over to Tony, who's led on that particular work.
Yeah, well, as you know, Chair, it was announced in the budget, in terms of actually designating the zone, that's Treasury take that forward, so we're liaising along with we're the main point of contact with Treasury, so we're working with colleagues in DEDI and InvestNI to actually provide the map to Treasury, and then they take it through their kind of legislative process to designate the zone, so we're going through those statutory arrangements at the moment.
Okay, and how long will that take?
We don't have a defined timetable, but we're hoping to do that quite quickly. We're working on we're defining the final boundary of the zone at the moment, and we'll be providing that to Treasury in the coming weeks.
Is there a broad timetable at all, or what are we aiming towards?
We've asked Treasury have yet to come back to us just to define precisely how we're going to do that, but it's something that we're looking to do quite quickly. It's not something that we foresee as being protracted.
Okay, so something before year end, say, or?
Certainly, that would be my hope.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, members, Leslie?
Yeah, I'm interested by, obviously the budget 15-16 is going to be very important. But from what you said, Peter, we're a bit concerned that June monitoring could basically be the main driving force in preparing the 2015-16 budget. Is that a fair comment?
No, it's not a driving point, but there's related issues. A key issue for the 15-16 budget is what happens to welfare reform. That will drive the types of, for example, savings you have to drive out of departments to cover whatever costs there are associated with that. Whether it's agreed or not, it'll set one of the high-level key issues. The fines and
it's just one of the factors, then, isn't it?
It is, but it's a very significant one because over £100 million of penalties in
when does the next comprehensive spending round start?
It will start after the UK election next year. There's the election in May.
So it's actually in the 15-16 year.
Oh yes, it'll be May by the time the new government's in place, and they will then
So then that's
produce a spending round.
16-17 it'll kick in, will it?
Yes, from 16-17 onwards. We still don't know whether it's going to be over 2, 3 or 4 years, but usually it's 3 or 4 years.
And the other question, Chair, that exercises me, I believe Northern Ireland should have been the enterprise zone, you know, the full area, because I don't know how, and maybe you could tell me, Tony, if he led on it, how Coleraine managed to appear suddenly out of the mist. Nice for the people of Coleraine, but you know it could apply to everywhere else. Yeah.
Well, there were a number of criteria that we needed to adhere to. The legislation at the time for the zone meant that the benefits could only needed to be derived up to 2017. Now, there's been some changes in that, and that legislative time has been extended. But the enterprise zone only offers enhanced capital allowances, and they are only attractive to a project which is hugely capital intensive and is going to make profits very quick. Will be able to offset those against profits very quickly. So essentially, it was trying to identify a project as much as a location that could benefit from those. And also, the way the UK or the EU state aid rules, if you benefit from those enhanced capital allowances, you can't benefit from other forms of assistance, such as selective financial assistance that InvestNI would provide. So that is quite limiting in terms of the types of projects that can be suitable. So the Five Nines data centre was quite advanced in terms of discussions that we're having we're having with that company in terms of choosing Northern Ireland and Coleraine as a location, and that was essentially the project that was available that could benefit from enhanced capital allowances at that time. If we'd have put it somewhere else, say, didn't have a project so well developed, it wouldn't have been able to benefit from the capital allowances that could be offered. So it was really defined by the fact we had a project that was.
Right, so the lesson there is we all have to think ahead. But could I ask you the final question? With the Coleraine Enterprise Zone now being considered, how do you prevent other companies in Northern Ireland relocating to there? What's the point?
Well, it's going to be it'll be a quite tightly defined site. In terms of the enterprise zone in Coleraine, so it's not a huge site where there's a lot of scope for other companies to move. And again, the rules in enhanced capital allowances are quite strict, and only particular types of projects can benefit. So it's not something that would be attractive to many companies in other areas in Northern Ireland who, for instance, might be benefiting from other forms of support from Invest Northern Ireland. So that's not perceived to be a major risk. In terms of that specific site.
Would it not be financially more attractive, though, to many companies?
Well, again, it depends on the nature of the company, and they need to be heavily capital intensive. They need, if they were considered, the Five Nines Centre wouldn't have been eligible for other forms of support that perhaps other companies are getting through Invest Northern Ireland. So there would be that trade-off. But that site is being earmarked. The footprint for that site is largely defined around the Five Nine project. There isn't, as far as I'm aware, a lot of spare capacity on that site that will accommodate other projects. Now there is areas around that, and we're hoping that putting that data centre in there could almost have kind of we'll build in the regions standing as a kind of a telecommunications hub, and will be a catalytic project to bring in other investment. But in terms of benefiting from the enhanced capital allowances, that's not really an option.
No doubt we'll return to that one in the future. Thanks.
Okay, members, any other questions? Can I just ask as well, there's reference to the SME package in the Minister's letter as well, and the potential to benefit 98% of businesses in the North. Can you give us any more information on the specific benefits of that, and how DFP and DEDI are involved in it?
I haven't personally been involved in the SME side, Tony. I don't know if this side.
No, I haven't any side on that, Chair, but we can certainly engage with DEDI and come back to you on that.
Yeah. Okay, members?
Sorry, just Chair, before you go on, the SME package, the government announced consulting to better understand whether, and if so, how to match SMEs rejected for a loan with alternative credit providers. So it's looking at matching them with alternative credit providers. quicker process for when an SME wants finance elsewhere and need action from their bank, and a business bank pilot for a wholesale guarantee programme to incentivise banks to lend more to SMEs. That's at a UK level, and obviously that will translate into SMEs here.
So can we get local information just in terms of where that's at?
Yes, certainly we can.
Okay. No problem. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, moving on to the briefing by research on preventative spending. I can refer members to Assembly research paper at page 34 through to 53 of your packs. Morning, Pamela. How are you?
Morning, Chair. Caught me a wee bit unawares.
Pamela, do you want to take us through the research paper first of all, and then I'll open up the questions to members. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. This briefing seeks to examine preventative initiatives with particular emphasis on Scotland's budgeting for prevention policy. I'll be able to take questions at the end. This paper builds on previous research from 2011, which set out evidence on early intervention strategies with specific case studies. It's formatted in the following manner. Issues involved in defining preventative expenditure. It reviews the Scottish approach to prevention. It details obstacles to implementing a prevention agenda, and then goes into details on potential issues that Northern Ireland might face if they were implementing a prevention agenda. First section's on defining preventative expenditure. Although it is relatively straightforward to provide a broad meaning for the term, describing a goal to reduce public service costs by addressing problems at an early stage, academics have noted that there's no strict definition for prevention. This has led to criticism, and one MSP has actually stated that in order to focus resources properly, the Scottish Parliament needs to be robust about what it considers preventative expenditure to be. The Scottish Government approach in 2010, in face of a real-term decline in public expenditure, they commissioned Dr. Campbell Christie to carry out a review into future delivery of public services. The Christie Commission reported in June 2011, stating that a key objective of public reform should be to focus resources on preventative measures. In its response, the Scottish Government pledged to make preventative expenditure a top priority, and it allocated £500 million to preventative expenditure. It was over the following 3 years. Prevention is seen in Scotland as underpinning many of the government's key aims and objectives. Academics, however, have commented that prevention policy within Scotland is really a general direction and it allows public bodies to set its own priorities. This can lead to circumstances where each area is pursuing its own projects with minimal reference to learning from other areas, and has led to issues where some areas are actually fitting expenditure on current services under the prevention heading and just relabelling, which is not. Obstacles to implementing a prevention agenda. That wasn't going to come out. While it's generally accepted that prevention is better than cure, funding has rarely followed the maxim. This is due in part because spending is not classified as preventative within UK public accounts. While the Christie Commission estimated that 40% of public expenditure was used to deal with results of social problems rather than prevent them. However, although widely accepted, the calculation has been reviewed and investigated, and it was identified that it could not be relied on. The term used was it was done on the back of an envelope, not my term. Others have tried to replicate the calculation, and it has been viewed as largely unsuccessful. Within the paper, I did suggest that perhaps the committee may like to inquire if DFP could introduce a classification system between acute and preventative expenditure, if there's not one already in place in Northern Ireland. A further issue which can be an obstacle to prevention agenda is a lack of a robust evidence base. This has been identified as a specific problem in Northern Ireland, where the Sure Start scheme was not evaluated. There are also other obstacles. Funding is a significant barrier, short political timescales, misalignment between costs and benefits. And although we say prevention is better than cure, sometimes it's easier to see what an issue is at the end rather than identify what caused the issue at the beginning. Section 5 details potential issues for Northern Ireland if they're initiating a preventative agenda. These are all detailed in earlier sections of the report, so I didn't go into these again, only to say that defining prevention would be a particular issue. Targeting of preventative expenditure, classification of expenditure, cross-cutting budgets, and of course leadership. In conclusion, while there are obstacles to prevention which have been highlighted within the paper, recognising these at the outset could ensure that if Northern Ireland were to go down this road, we would actually be able to learn from and build on the experience that Scotland has had.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you, Chair.
In terms, I mean, you said at the start that there's no strict definition in terms of what preventative spending is. That'd be something, I mean, if departments are not convinced by the idea, or does it give some departments the option of allocating some areas as being preventative spending without changing what their budget says to become more preventative in terms of their approach?
That MSP has actually said that every person that has come before them has classified all their expenditure as preventative, that if it's not specifically defined, it gives too broad an approach. Because at the end of the day, all education could be classified as preventative because it helps people to improve their lot in life. Without the strict definition, it just gives too many opportunities to get around things.
Well, thank you very much. Sometimes I think putting a title on something is nothing more than trying to say good common sense needs to be acted upon on many occasions, and appreciate that one example is the Rivers Agency, where the £1,000 where they're paying out to people who are regularly getting their properties flooded, and by putting some measure in place they can maybe alleviate that expenditure to anybody on the retrospective basis and ensure that it doesn't happen in the future. But you did allude to something, and it was about Scotland and people not necessarily identifying that by making an investment in one department, they could actually be saving money for another department, but they were working in their own silo, so they didn't particularly care.
Yes.
That culture is alive and well in Northern Ireland. You know that that's my budget, and I don't particularly care about yours. You know, never mind that it's all public money. How do we bring this across to where we ensure that there is, if we go down this route, that there is a clause, or not a clause, but a condition implied within it that it has to actually ensure that it does across departmental? Because I think of one in particular, and it's just, I'll mention health. Somebody requires a hip replacement, they're in work, they're working for the public sector, but while they're on the waiting list, they're still receiving their full pay, and they can be on off work for many months, if not years, waiting on that operation. And as a consequence of that, the public purse is out a fortune. Now, albeit it's from another budget, okay, but it's not out of the health budget. How can we ensure that by investing, use the same model as the German model, if you don't have your operation within 6 weeks, the health department start to pay your wages? You appreciate where I'm coming from?
Yes, I
Because
appreciate
I think you have to use the carrot and stick approach, and unfortunately the stick is the only way that sometimes is going to make people take action.
Well, obviously that is one example, but some initiatives, perhaps like within the Justice Department, that might cost more money, rather than it could, at the outset, when coming up with a particular intervention or initiative, if the people that would benefit and the people who would be enforcing it got together and actually split both the risks, the money that's outlaid, and the rewards, the money that's saved. I know in Scotland, in Glasgow in particular, there was a chief superintendent that actually insisted that the money saved from the murder squad was invested back into the community, into initiatives that would stop, you know, young people going into a life of crime. So I think it's important to actually sit down when designing the initiative, really, and come up with what the outcome is, how you're going to find the evidence, and then plot it, well, not plot, but, you know, sit down cohesively with other departments and, you know, share risks, share rewards. And that's the only way to really go forward, because silo budgeting is
That'll be a big culture change for Northern Ireland. Because
it is a big culture change.
Because for too many generations, it has been, that's my budget, and I don't want to spend it on other things that, you know, it even happens within our hospitals, it happens in our schools, it happens on roads. You know,
yes.
The fact that we're spending more money paying out on claims on our roads than what we actually spend properly repairing potholes is a big problem.
Yeah.
That is a major preventative spend. By investing into maybe more prompt repairs, you could probably put more money towards roads.
Well, I think only with cross-cutting budgets, you know, that you're going to get that sort of buy-in, you know, because, as you say, most people are just sort of, the blinkers are on, you know, this is my money. But if they're taking a risk with it as well,
yeah,
and, you know, share the risk, share the rewards, and go. But that's something to think about before just going into it blindly and seeing how that can be put in place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Leslie.
It's a bit like whistling in the dark, this, so isn't it?
Yes, to an
I
extent.
mean, we have a situation here where the Department of Education, for example, wouldn't even look at cost saving. But, you know, when I first read this, I thought, is this not another example of the Emperor's new clothes? There's nothing here.
Okay.
The proper budgeting process surely should be wise and timely. In other words, it takes into consideration that which must be done, that which establish the priorities for them. You know, well, obviously put preventative stuff up the front end. If we don't do this year, then X will happen. I would have thought that's a normal budget process.
I think there is a major belief that the public sector is there to help the most needy. And the most needy tend to be the people who have travelled down the road, you know, further down the road. So it's to have a complete mind shift to actually getting something into place before that has happened. And it's a mind shift that there has to be, you know, like strong leadership from the front, because...
We're in trouble straight away then, aren't we?
Pardon?
We're in trouble straight away.
I didn't say that, but it has been noted as a problem within Scotland because they are ring-fencing their health budget at the expense of initiatives that might improve general health, you know, sort of stop diabetes in its tracks or whatever, but they are ring-fencing the budget. So it's not going into the initiatives that could possibly reduce the levels of sickness and absences.
It's an interesting subject, but I think it's going to be one that's purely academic. You can talk about it, make what you like out of it. And as you've said, you know, unless you have a proper definition before you even come in, the whole thing's candy floss.
I think there is an element of that. You do need to be robust about what you want it to be, how you want it to work, and then lead from the front on that. And without those mechanisms in place, it'll just be a matter of relabelling the way Scotland has, unfortunately, in some instances, not in all, but in some instances, experienced.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Mitchell.
Yeah, and I mean, in many ways, like Scotland, maybe because of the way in which they're structured governmentally, are able to move in a more agile way than we are. Our situation is complicated by the coalition nature of the structures, and so it is, and so it has to be. But it seems to me that it's difficult to find even where there would be more autonomy or freedom for action, as in Scotland, than there is here. That it is you know, it is an aspiration that is proved difficult to deliver.
It definitely is an aspiration that has proved difficult to deliver. And in some ways, Scotland, they have a much more devolved system there.
Yeah.
And but that has also caused a problem in that there hasn't been the learning from one organisation to another. So perhaps instead of looking at our system as a barrier, we could look at it, well, it's much more centralised. There's less people to, you know, get on board with it. You know, that learning could perhaps be helped by that.
But you see, if we take as a reality this silo culture, that will continue to defeat any efforts to, say, take a more holistic approach to public expenditure programmes or even public service delivery generally. We had a concept which is kind of slightly fallen off the edge of the table of invest to save.
Yes.
Which it seems to me, you know, is, first of all, it's easier to understand. And if we were to take, no, not necessarily a piecemeal, but maybe an incremental approach where we were addressing, say, a predefined, and it's not up to me just to theorise what it would be, but say less than the total budget, but nevertheless some kind of reasonable and significant resource that could in fact be spent in a wiser and preventative fashion, that we might be able to introduce the concept. We might be able to kind of, you know, begin to dismantle the silo mentality that exists. If they're defending 100% of the budget, you know, they will always kind of reach for the more extreme examples of what would happen if you did this or you took that away or you kind of broke that down. But if in fact what they were discussing was, you know, even 10% of the budgets, particularly across the spending departments, is a huge amount of money, and you could apply a different spending culture in those circumstances, and I think that might be worth discussing.
I would agree to actually start in very small terms, you know, and try and get people.
Well, I wouldn't go very small. But as big as we can manage.
To try and get buy-in, because I think there always will be the NIMBYs and all those type of people. You know, that's fine for you to do that, but I'm going to continue with.
Although they didn't do it, I think everybody got the idea in terms of it was Sammy introduced it of invest to save.
But I think just on that one point, and it comes back on it. I think our system does not lend itself to working that very well, because every single, and I'm talking about the ministers from a minister's point of view, what minister's going to say? Well, look.
No, I agree.
And I think maybe a point of, and might mean some radical thinking here, where money would need to be actually pulled and held in the centre to actually deal with issues which are cross-cutting and more of a benefit to the overall issue. And that's something that needs it. I know the coalition setup doesn't necessarily leave it right. That's where a nice dictatorship actually might help.
You notice it was the DUP said that.
I never said anything about a dictatorship.
No, but you appreciate where I'm coming from.
I know exactly what
because
you
it
mean.
doesn't always.
But you're not going to get it.
No, but it doesn't necessarily allow the flexibility to bring forward, because, as Leslie says, common sense is not always that common, and to try and do it, you have to have some controls put in place.
Well, I mean, the reason I was exploring that is that I actually think that there is a bit of work that the committee could do, not on our work programme, but perhaps our future work programme. I think there's room for an inquiry here about the cost benefits, about the the resistance to just doing sensible ways, projects. And I mean, I understand all the kind of the political and the social dynamics that are at work here, and they are going to be hugely resistant to this. And we're not in a single conversation going to take this anywhere. So we can join.
But it would be helpful to.
But I think we should actually think about how we would approach this, and I mean, I would ask Shane and the team to give some consideration and advice maybe at the next meeting. But if we built this into our future work programme and maybe commissioned, some research and maybe even went to see how other people are approaching it, we might be able to come up with something that would get a bit of traction with them. I agree. We could just have a conversation here and that's the end of it, really, because nothing has been impacted.
But I think I would support that. I think that's a good suggestion. And I think not only just to look at what happened in government, I think looking at how very large firms actually deal with these types of areas where they will invest to save, and I'm saying invest to save, but it's the same principle, because by doing it in another area they can make big savings. And I'm thinking of Bombardier, where they actually have made some major changes which have improved the production and allowed things to flow a lot smoother. They found that where there were hiccups and certain people were quite precious about their end of things by making slight changes.
Right. And got away with their energy de-waste project and all of that. But a creative thinking there. Anyway, but I do think, what do you think outside the box? Yeah. And just the lingo rule, it's a DUP dictatorship, all right?
Well, we were...
Okay, members content for officials to come back with proposals and that next week?
Yeah.
Yes.
Trip to Scotland you're talking about them, actually?
It sounds like it, yeah.
I'm sure you could go further, because there's a lot of things on the continent too.
Okay. Are they doing anything in Lanzarote?
Afraid not.
Okay, Pamela.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members, moving on to the next briefing. Research on the European Investment Bank. Refer members to pages 55 through to 70. Michael, you're very welcome back to the committee again.
You'll be reading on your computer.
Okay, you want to give us a brief overview to start, and then we'll move straight into questions.
Sure. I'll just go through each section and then take questions at the end. Sure. So we start off with some background to the European Investment Bank. It was created in 1958 with the Treaty of Rome. It's owned by the EU member states. Now, the bank doesn't draw funds from the EU budget. It finances its operations through borrowing on the capital markets, mainly through bond issues. And the main role of the EIB is to facilitate the financing of investment projects alongside, really, the structural funds. Now, in terms of the shareholders, the 28 member states of the EU are the shareholders of the bank. So really, in this way, you can kind of think of it as a type of a credit union for the EU. And in terms of percentage of ownership, the UK has 16% of the shares. Now, the bank is really run by a board of governors, a board of directors and a management committee. The Board of Governors really set the policy for the bank, and they consist of the finance ministers from member states. So the UK's representative will be Chancellor Osborne, and the Republic of Ireland will be Finance Minister Noonan. So really they just set the policy for the bank, and it's the Board of Directors really that grant the actual loans and make decisions on the loans. They will also set the interest rates. And the day-to-day running of the bank really is down to the Management Committee. So the next section really deals with the financing products themselves that the EIB produce. Now this section here is really just highlights the main products, it's not an exhaustive list. These are really the products that will be of most relevance to Northern Ireland and our particular economy and situation. So the first one really is project loans. Now this really deals with large projects where the total investment will exceed €25 million. EIB will cover up to 50% of that, but in reality they tend to cover on average about a third of it. Next then we looked at the intermediated loans, where really the EIB then will lend to local financial institutions who then on loan to the infrastructure projects themselves for up to 25% per project. Now the intermediaries are also have to match funds, so they have to lend the same amount that the EIB is lending to them. Okay. Now the next one, the project bonds, is a slightly more complicated example. In this one, it's down to the infrastructure company itself to raise the money through a bond issue, and the EIB then will support the bond issue through a loan to that company. The loan really improves the credit rating of the company, and in that case it also should help the sale of the bond. So that's known. It's actually called a project bond credit enhancement. Now it can also be a line of credit, but it's more normally a loan. And I've given an example there in the UK of a wind farm where the EIB has provided 45.8 million, which represents 15% of the bond. So it's really just to support the initial bond that the company has produced. The next product is really flexible SME funding under the Jeremy programme. Now, finance really is provided by the Jeremy programme for the member states or regional authorities like Northern Ireland, so that they can put their structural funds into a holding account or a holding fund, which is then used by the local financial institutions to on loan to the SMEs. And I've given you an example there of the types of finance that's provided, micro loans and venture capital down at page 7 there. And at the moment there are 4 Jeremy programmes across the UK in operation. Now 3 in the north of England and 1 in Wales. Now, in Section 3, really, I've looked at examples of how the EIB has funded projects in Wales, Scotland and the Republic of Ireland. It's more or less the main projects that you would expect, a mixture of universities and big projects like hospitals. Of note, really, would be the Finance Wales Jeremy funding there, where in 2009 the EIB lent 75 million to Finance Wales to provide capital for SMEs. And also in the Republic of Ireland, there's an example of an intermediated loan of €200 million to the Allied Irish Bank, again to support small businesses across Ireland. So in 2012, the average loan actually under the previous programme in 2011 per company was €95,000. Now the Section 4 then looks at the EIB in Northern Ireland, and there's 3 main sections of that. Firstly, I've looked at the role of the Strategic Investment Board. Then I've looked at the infrastructure programmes themselves, which have received funding, and finally the financial consequences of the loans. So really the role of the Strategic Investment Board is really as a facilitator between the EIB and the projects that are seeking funding. And I've highlighted the various roles that they... Now, the infrastructure programmes and the next section really that received finance. Again, it's mainly the road projects there. In 2006, the EIB lent €90 million for the M1 and M2 motorways, and the year after that, there was 169 signed off, 169 million euro signed off for the A1, A4 and A5 trunk roads. And most recently, it's been in the press quite a lot. There's a 175 million euro loan to the University of Ulster to provide a new campus in the Belfast city centre. And there have been other projects as well. I put that in the table at page 13. Northern Ireland Water, there's a framework facility for education, and the Enniskillen Acute Hospital. I put a wee note at the end of that. Basically, the whole point of this briefing really was to provide an overview of the project, so there isn't any great detail. I put a wee suggestion there that the committee may wish to ask SIB for further information on any of the above projects. So finally then, I'd like to just take you through some of the financial consequences of availing of EIB funding for Northern Ireland. If executive departments borrow from the EIB, this will affect the block grant, as borrowing is seen as spending from the capital budget. With this in mind, the Finance Minister is promoting EIB support amongst local councils following the review of public administration. Now, I've put a couple of scrutiny points really for the committee there on page 15. These really stem because if you look at the statement of funding policy, it clearly states that the devolved administrations have the reserve power to set maximum capital expenditure and capital investment by local authorities, and that borrowing then will count against the block grant. So really the questions that I would pose for the committee to perhaps ask would be, post RPA, what increased borrowing powers are envisioned for local councils to access the EIB financial support for infrastructure, and will this financial support have any ramifications for future public finance allocations? And really just the concluding remarks, that perhaps the most interesting thing is that EIB support to both the UK and the Republic of Ireland has increased over the last 2 years, quite substantially really. From 2011 to 2013, the Republic of Ireland's support increased by 35%, and I think in the UK, with the same time frame, it was 59% increase. So that's.
Thank you, Michael. Can I ask, are we in the north punching at or even above our weight in terms of drawing down some of these funds in comparison to both the south and across the water? Or would you have enough information to make a judgment on that?
Whenever you look at all the information really is, a lot of the information on certainly on the finances taken from the EIB is taken from their website, and you can go in and look at the breakdown of the member state, and then once you go into that, it does differentiate into the individual programmes. So it does take a while to look through, but there's certainly a lot of programmes in England. They're using the money, and Northern Ireland, it would appear on a very a very first look, it would appear that we aren't possibly using it, but I think that again is probably to do with the worries over the block grant, the implications of that and the consequences of using those loans against our future capital budgets. But certainly, well, in the terms of Wales, Wales do seem to be using a lot in the as I mentioned, the support for SMEs there through the Jeremy project programme. Wales does seem to be using EIB loans quite a lot more than any of the other devolved administrations. But I was having a wee think about this. It could be that Wales's position in Europe as a less developed nation, or less developed region, I should say, might have an impact on that. I'm not totally sure, but that might be one explanation for that.
And you made reference to the councils there as well. I mean, is there any other examples in other jurisdictions where There already is councils with a greater rate space to allocate or to avail of it, and if they've done that successfully. Is there examples we could look at?
Yeah, I certainly can come back to that now. Yeah.
Okay, members, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. It's a complex subject. I was just wondering, it's still unclear to me anyway, if in fact we exercise EIB loans, that it doesn't come as a cost to us. I think the net result of your paper is that it does come, a net reduction to us. Is that right?
Certainly, if executive departments would use the loans, they would be used as part of their capital budgets.
Right, so we have to be offset against other spending then?
Yes, and that seems to be why the Finance Minister is promoting the use of these loans by councils after RPA.
But surely it would make sense to use those where in fact you could affect a lower interest rate.
Well,
from reading this, I don't think that works through. I'll maybe take that one up to someone else. But
sure.
It seemed to me that it's a wee bit of a double dumper in the way, because obviously if you use it, for major financial infrastructure projects, that other spending is affected, and you don't get the benefit of that lower rate.
Yeah. Well, that certainly would be an issue for DFP to work through the ramifications of that spending and see if that were the case. I think the problem could be that some of these projects will be 25 years. And the big road projects would be certainly there's one for 25 years. But the individual detail could possibly be provided by either DFP or SIB on that, and then we could do those calculations. But I would assume, and I have an idea that the reason why the Finance Minister is going down that line, that those calculations may have been done.
For arm's length bodies and local government, yeah.
Possibly.
And the other point that occurred to me, financial transactions capital working its way into the frame now. What do you think the likely effects are there?
Well,
you
that
have
would be
a cocktail. I'm thinking the university move to centre of Belfast was a good example. Was a significant EIB loan, and it really was made possible by the use of financial transactions capital.
Yeah.
Also saved the day in that, because if we don't use it, we lose it.
Yeah.
It's a different mix in the cocktail, isn't it?
Well, that would be slightly outside the remit of this paper. Again, that would be more Pamela's side of the house, to be honest.
It's not an easy subject.
No, some of it's very complex. Yeah.
Rachel?
Well, it's really clarification, and it may not be available today. But I mean, if we were working in conjunction with the Treasury officials in terms of projected. Agreed kind of projected capital expenditure projects that were factored into the Barnett calculations. I don't understand why the executive can't use additional opportunities over and above what is agreed with Treasury without consequence. Going to the market or going to the European Investment Bank to raise finance for other projects that we have to do. We're into sometimes Hobson's choices in terms of which projects we can put the executive block grant. We can apply the capital funding to, and others have to just get into the queue. But it would seem to me that there are opportunity costs involved in not being able to proceed. Whenever we're trying to grow the economy, for example, where we're trying to increase the attractiveness of this economic region for inward investment. So if we were prepared to enter into additional capital expenditures availing of the lower interest charges and carrying that burden, the interest charge burden, how would that have I don't understand why that triggers an impact or a reduction in the capital budget allocation and burn it.
Yeah, well, all I could really say to that is that the Finance Minister seems very keen to...
I know, I do understand. I've actually read what he said. But, I mean, I'm now asking a question about that.
I would accept
I would like an answer to.
Yeah, well, that's really why...
I mean, if we're working within agreed parameters, we're not breaching any agreement that we have with Treasury in terms of our programme for government capital expenditure. Why can't we do other things then that are outside that we are prepared to pay for?
Certainly a question for...
I would like an answer.
Okay, members? Okay, Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, members, can we agree to send both papers to the EFP for response and also the EIB paper to SIB?
Yes.
Agreed. Moving on to rate rebate placement arrangements, consideration of proposed options. Fair members to Secretariat paper pages 73 to 76 and the various DFP papers and stakeholder responses pages 77 to 153. Shane, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, Chair. The committee has received various briefings on this issue over the last few months. Last week it agreed to schedule an additional session today to try and come to a committee position on the various models for the treatment of universal credit in assessing rate rebate, and also on which, if any, of the options might be preferred for in terms of the existing rate relief schemes to either remove or reduce the existing schemes to help meet the funding shortfall. So decisions on those two issues are really up to the committee today if it's minded to and a position to make those decisions. So in order to inform that, the committee decided to write out to the key stakeholders that have been engaging with the EFP over the recent months and seek short written submissions, up-to-date positions, and a summary of those is included at the Secretariat paper on pages 74 to 76 of the pack. I just asked Phil maybe very quickly just to skip through what the key stakeholders said, just for members, to remind members.
Thanks, Chair. Really just as a recap from our last week's session, we wrote out to the stakeholders on page 2 of the response you will see that Law Centre and Housing Rights Service had responded, and what we'd sought to do was indicate what their preferred model was and any other observations that they'd made. Overall, there was a mixed response between models 7 and 8. Law Centre and Housing Rights Service opted for their preferred model of being 7, purely because it felt that they would have a higher rate of passporting, which would realise some costs. And whilst there would be a cost of adopting that model because more people would be passported, they felt that you could offset that by removing some of the other schemes, such as clergy residence or maximum capital value, pensioner allowance and early payment schemes. However, they weren't averse to Model 8 as well, but they would like to see an increased earnings disregard of 100% as opposed to the 50% which was in the work incentive. NILGA, again, were very much on the same page that they were looking at Model 7. However, they weren't against Model 8, but then would like to see that increased disregard figure of 100%. Moving to the Institute of Revenue Rating and Valuation, they actually felt that Model 8 was their preferred option, and they felt that whilst there would be funding demands, some other existing schemes could be removed, such as the lone pensioner allowance or the capital value cap. Fair Rates Campaign, there again, also opted for Model 8 or 8A. Particularly in case that they would like to see an increased earnings disregard, but also because there would be some people that could be impacted under that group, they would also like to see some form of hardship fund established. Citizens Advice Bureau, which was one of the key ones that officials had mentioned last week, and initially throughout the consultation with the department had sort of sought for Model 7, but they've now sort of conceded with the work done with DFP that with the work incentive that Model 8 would most likely fit. And then finally coming over to Advice NI, they really didn't indicate a position either way. They feel that more information is needed and more fuller costings are required, and really I suppose they haven't really indicated its position until more figure work's done to give an indication of affected groups.
Okay, Mitchell?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the elephant in the room is the welfare reform issue and the absence of agreement on that. And I think that has a caveat. Any approach my party would take to it anyway. I think options 7 and then the later option 8 are the two best options. And I think that, you know, without prejudice to the discussions on welfare reform, I think those offer the best kind of outcome. So, just so Sinn Féin would be supporting. I think if we had to pick a preference, it would be option 8, but I think option 7, when we saw that initially, I thought was the best approach as well. But it's an entirely hypothetical kind of discussion we're having here, unless and until there is agreement on welfare reform. And in the absence of that, I don't think any further comments that I would make should kind of prejudice that view, because we're not going anywhere unless there is such agreement, and it's hardly likely in the next 2 weeks anyway.
Any other views?
Chair, I mean, it's clearly narrowed down to 7 and 8, and there's pros and cons with those. I don't think probably too much point in us being too definitive on that side of it, and see what the Parliament is on.
Okay, Roisin, do you want to respond to any of that? Or?
No, I mean, I agree with you that it's probably, the consensus seems to be that it's down to model 7 or 8. Obviously, the department's preferred model is model 8. We think it's the fairest.
Cheaper.
And it's the most affordable as well. Model 7 will cost an extra 6.6 million, and that's when we're being faced with a 10% cost, we would say that that's not affordable. And also, there are anomalies within it that we don't think are fair.
I think, Chair, the Law Centre makes a good point, and that is that the incidence of passporting is going to be much greater from Model 7, which is attractive. But the reality, as you say, Roisin, that Model 8's cheaper and therefore looks like the preferred one by, if you like, the professionals.
Yeah, probably true.
Just in terms of the second part of the decision to be made, which, if any, of the existing rate relief schemes should be removed, retained or adjusted in order to help defray the cost of the executive. The members have any views on that second part?
I personally don't know how we could deal effectively with that pending agreement, because it's an entirely new threshold if we get agreement on welfare reform.
I think, Chair, to some extent it kind of flows from whatever the initial decision is to some extent, so it's difficult to say a great deal.
The direction of travel is mapped out, I think, by option 8 and 7 to an extent. But that's nearly as far as you could take it today.
Okay.
Just to kind of get something formal in terms of a committee position, Chair, would something, the other issue that was raised by some of the stakeholders was the need for maybe transitional protection and hardship fund. I don't know what members' views are on that, as well as these other considerations, whether the committee might see merit in having that in principle, at least something in place. Again, it's all dependent on agreement around it.
I suspect that is probably part of the discussion that's ongoing, but I mean, I don't mind if the committee feel. I think, we're talking about step change here, and clearly we're talking about providing support where there would be unintended, somewhere use the expression of unintended consequences in this process. Not that long. But so yes, I think that's probably a good suggestion. I wouldn't mind that being recorded as something that we could support.
It's just really a form of words, Chair. Would something along the following lines get agreement amongst members that the committee sees merit in applying one of the versions of Model 8 for the treatment of universal credit and assessing rate rebate, subject to executive agreement on the associated welfare reform? And then go on to say that the committee recognises that agreement on this latter issue would help facilitate a selection in terms of the options for which of the existing schemes could be reduced or removed. And then finally, in such circumstances, considerations should also be given to establishing transitional protection or a hardship fund for those most adversely affected by the interim arrangements put in place. Something along those.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to kind of respond to that as you've articulated, but you probably could, without prejudice to the discussions that are ongoing, indicate that options 8 and 7 represent, in our view, at this stage, the direction of travel. Does that help? See, that might help the department in terms of their...
Chair, I mean, I suppose the only thing is taking on board what's been said in terms of the overall cost, but I suppose if I have to choose, I mean, I think 7's a reasonable fallback option, but I think 8 maybe slightly better because of the affordability.
I would go with that. I just wanted 7 kept on the frame in case we need a wee bit of flexibility subsequently. Yeah, I would go along with that. So 8 is the preferred option, 7 is the fallback.
Something more to that effect.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well done, Shane.
Okay. Okay, Roisin?
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's fine.
Okay, members, moving on to correspondence then.
Chair, just on correspondence before we get into that, the very interesting letter, shall we say, that, perhaps just on that basis, while I'm not a practising, but I'm a non... or indeed, I'm a practising... No, I'm trying to say I'm a practising...
Why didn't you say that?
But in light of the fact I'm registered as non-practising, and I would be a non-practising member of the Bar Library in that regard, I'd maybe just withdraw from the point of view in terms of correspondence.
Yourself from the content.
Absolutely. I'm away to find a suitable hotel.
That's Hansard, you know.
For keeping
Just in light of the correspondence that we have received, appreciate that it appears to be anonymous.
Just could I refer to the fact that it's restricted, first of all?
Yeah.
Chair, just sorry, I should just clarify there the restriction. I added the restriction to members because when I read through it, there was one extract in particular that I thought it might be possible to identify individuals. But I actually subsequently received a phone call from one person reporting to be one of the authors of the letter, asking if the committee had received it and when it would go for consideration. He also indicated that they do intend to go to the press with it. So
restriction will be lifted.
So yeah, so it's just to clarify on that point.
Could I ask, we're going to get inside of it, you know, in terms of this week's pack, but what are the options to the committee in dealing with this, given that...
Prefer it PAC.
Chair, I was thinking in terms of what's the remit in terms of the committee and DFP. The forthcoming bill on the regulation of legal complaints and which deals with solicitors and barristers is not directly relevant, but DFP has a remit obviously in that area in terms of bringing that bill forward. So one approach that the committee might wish to consider, if it's minded to take some action, remember, mindful that this is anonymous, it's also uncorroborated and unsubstantiated allegations, but mindful of all of that, if it was thinking in terms of some action, one approach might be to write to the Bar Council to establish two things: what procedures and safeguards exist to prevent such circumstances arising, and secondly, what independent processes exist to investigate such allegations. Just for the committee's
Does this qualify as a whistleblower letter?
Well, I'm not sure of the answer to that, to be honest. I don't know enough in terms of the policies and procedures and law around whistleblowing. I just don't know.
Well, the reason I'm asking, and you need to get advice on it, is I would think there's an obligation on us to refer it to the department if it's a whistleblower letter, if only to start the formal kind of process.
Yeah, sure. Well, it does mention in it that it's been copied, I think, to Finance and Justice departments, but the committee could do those two. It could write to the Bar on those two issues, and the Bar Council would also copy it to DFP. Actually, copy the correspondence to the Bar to DFP for information.
I'm just thinking about, like, if this does hit the public arena, it's going to maybe draw attention to the fact that it was given to us, and then the question arises, what do you do about it?
But there's something in my mind that there's something about this in the media maybe 6-7 weeks ago. but it was
I
to
think
do
I would have
with, it was
noticed
to
it.
do
Some
with
letter.
females. It was to do with girls, you know, that were coming through the system. That found they were
No,
being
you may be right.
something.
Make a damn good movie.
That was the prosecution service.
Right.
It was the inequality of pay in the prosecution
That's right.
service.
That's right.
I don't think it went into the area that this letter
It was just a
was into.
broad brush. I can't remember just the detail, but I knew there was something about these.
But I mean, if they're going public with this, then it is going to be, you know, a significant issue, and I think our steps need to be very prudent and careful, you know. I know how much notice you've had it, but if...
Would there be merit in actually, because...
I think you should be recording it anyway, as a letter that we've received, and maybe inquiring how people intend to process it. The relevant people are intending to process it.
Well, there are some comments within this that actually, I think, do warrant the AC looking at it, you know, because there's feather in their own nests and things such along those lines.
Yeah, well, there's some comments that does talk about public money. But a lot of the other issues, the broader issues, are ethical. I suppose.
Well, I think that we probably should ask our own secretariat just to inquire as to what would be the appropriate response to a letter like this. It's you know, it's fairly sensational stuff, to be honest, and at times I just wonder at the language that's been used and whatever, if it's supposedly coming from barristers, you know. But whatever about all of that, it may be necessary, for instance, for us to agree that that Shane and the team, and perhaps working with the chair and the deputy chair, if there's an urgent response required. If not, then bring it to next week's meeting with some recommendations.
Chair, I think the committee would be safe enough ground in those 2 points in terms of writing to the Bar Council and copying it to DFP. Beyond that, I just wouldn't be able to advise in terms of whether PAC would have a remit,
or justice,
or the Audit Office, I don't know, or justice, but certainly writing to the Bar Council. The committee has already taken evidence from the Bar Council on the bill that's coming to the committee, so it has, you know, there is a remit there.
Well, we agree to that, and perhaps also agree that if your advice or consultation indicates that you would correspond with other departments or committees as appropriate, and that would allow you then to do. So we're agreeing that we're Bar Council and our own department, and then if your consultation indicates, then you will further kind of correspond if that's the feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Proposed.
In terms of other correspondence, Chair, I just draw members' attention to DOJ response to in relation to the Randox Laboratories issue. That contract is further correspondence. That's at page 207 of the pack. Members previously, there was correspondence from DFP on this as well, and it's been the previous approach from the committee has been to copy that to Randox for information, and also where applicable to the Justice Committee, just for information if members are content enough to. Then at page 209 of the pack, DFP writing in relation to the strategic review of rate collection and recovery. The committee had sought details of the Ernst & Young recommendations from the review and what the action plan arising from that. So it's just really to check whether the committee want to follow up any further on that. In the meantime, for example, the specific actions in an indicative time frame, and the committee could also receive, you know, occasional updates on progress if it wished. If it wished to.
Agreed. Agreed.
Scrutiny. Then at page 214, there's a response from the Minister regarding the late receipt of papers to the committee. There is a report due from the Department of an up-to-date performance report, which is, I think, due today. So that could be deferred until next week when the report's available, Chair, if members are content.
Great.
And then finally, there's the page 306 of the pack, the DFP providing its occasional quarterly report on post-project evaluations, which the committee sends out to the other statutory committees for follow-up scrutiny at a departmental level and to PAC. Members are content, but also just in terms of DFP's position, there's one has been outstanding for a while now, for the period 1st of April 2010 to 31st of December 2013. Just if the committee also wanted to seek a bit more information on that one in terms of DFP's responsibilities, Chair.
Members content with that? Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's all the correspondence requiring decisions, Chair.
Okay, members. Draft work programme, pages 319 to 322, your packs. Members content work programmes updated reflecting agreements made today.
Yep.
Any other business? Next meeting Wednesday, 14th of May at 10 a.m.